Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of What's New in Prisma. The release is 4.15.0. We're pretty excited to have you. And this episode, I'll be co hosting with my colleague Ankur, and it's his first time, and he's been here for about 2 weeks. So, Ankur, how are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, Alex, for introducing me. Guys, I'm the newest developer advocate at Prisma from using the tool for the past 3-4 years to now being a part of it. So, hello. The
Hello,
first 2 weeks
Ankur.
have been great, again, to answer your question.
Awesome. Well, we're glad to have you, and we'll hopefully see you in the next upcoming streams as well. So, onto our agenda. We have four main items on our agenda. We'll start out by going over the release notes and then talk a bit about it and what's on there. And then we'll have two guests actually, Lars and Max, who'll share tools that they have built. And I hope you find them exciting because I think they are exciting and hopefully improving your workflow. And then after that, we'll have some plugs for a few things that we'd like to bring to your attention. And in case you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat so that we'll be able to answer them during the stream. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and move over to the release notes. Awesome. So is the font size okay? Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be. Yeah.
Awesome. So this is the release 4.15 that went out on Tuesday. There are a few improvements that we made in the release. It's not as big as the previous releases, but I hope you find them exciting. And the first change that we made in 4.15 is adding support for custom arguments or defining custom arguments in Prisma DB seed. So the value that this adds is that you can define custom arguments or run any other arbitrary program that you may want to run. And a few different use cases that you can think of this is like seeding different data in different environments. And then you can also partially seed data in some tables during your seed step. Now, this opens up so many opportunities because you can do anything that you want. And we have a small example here that's in the release notes that Ankur will be demoing a little later. In this case, it shows how exactly you can see different data in different environments. And we're using the parse args utility library from Node.js to parse the argument. The environment argument. And then when you run the npx prisma db seed, you'll provide the double dash. And this is something that I learned this week. It's also called, what's it called? A delimiter or an option terminator. It sounds really, really intense. It's the option terminator. And then you can pass any other arbitrary command. And in this case, this is a command, an option that we've defined in our program, but you can think of it as you can run any other command, whether it's a PG dump or a sync or dumping the schema for your database.
You can also have your custom parameters, like you could ensure that your database is empty before you seed it and do constraint checks. So, yeah.
Exactly. So this opens up lots of possibilities. Feel free to try it out when you upgrade to 4.15 and share with us the different tools or utilities that you've built. We'll be more than happy to learn what you build with it. And then the second improvement is improvement of the error messages when the query engine file is not found. And sometimes the query engine file may be missing in your, say, final application bundle for a few reasons. One of them is if the query engine that's supposed to or rather the target query engine for the platform your application is running on is missing. And an example that I can think of is, say, that's been popular and one has to define is when you're deploying to Netlify. Yeah. So the query engine that is usually generated when or downloaded and set up in your project during the build step is usually different from the one that is actually used when your application is running. And this is because the two platforms that your application is built on and the application that the platform your application is running on, they're usually different. So in this case, we improved the error message that would help you to debug such an example. And then another use case that this would be helpful in is when you're using a bundler, and sometimes, and if the query engine is not part of your final bundle, then the error message will be helpful to help you debug it a little faster. So yeah, in case you're experiencing this issue, sometimes let us know if the error messages are helpful so that we can help you be more productive at debugging the error messages. So yeah, and the final improvements that we made is the VS Code extension improvements. The first one is that we improved the file system watcher that is usually responsible for restarting the TypeScript server when you run Prisma generate, and it ensures that the types that are used within your project are actually in sync with whatever the TypeScript server has. For now, this is only available on Linux and Windows. Support for macOS will be coming soon, and it also requires use of Prisma CLI and the VS Code extension to version 4.15 or higher. The second improvement is adding a quick fixes action for VS Code that allows you to add the at underscore ID, yes, at map underscore ID
for Mongo, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So in this case, for example, this schema is invalid, and you can quickly debug it by adding the underscore ID. The action helps you do that. And finally, we added support for renaming symbols for composite types and views. This was previously not there. It exists for models, but it wasn't existing for types and models. So we hope you find this useful. And then, of course, there is a long list of other GitHub issues that we looked into, and we closed in preparation for the 4.15. And with that, I think we'll jump onto the demo for the Prisma DB seed.
Wait up. Where's my entire screen?
It's right there.
Okay.
Cool. I will bring it up to the stage, and then you can bump up the font just a bit.
Mm-hmm. Good?
Yes, that should be good. Yeah.
Okay, so for the demo, it's a pretty straightforward, simple example. You can basically it elaborates on the example that Alex showed. So you can see it for different environments. For like production, in this case, it would be production, test, and the dev environment. So I've written a few scripts that allows you to start up Prisma Studio and clear your database, as well as a simple dev script, which runs this script file. So if there's a user in the database, it just says hi. In this case, we have a simple seed file under Prisma. The font size is too large, I think. I'll just minimize it a little. Okay, so it uses the parse arg. So one thing that you have to take into account, it requires a version node version greater than 16.17. That's something that I struggle with. So just keep that in mind. And so over here, I have three functions. One's to see the development database, or the test database, or the production database. So in all three cases, you have a dev user for the dev environment, a test user for the test environment, and a prod user for the prod environment. And the console.time just measures how long it takes to seed your database. So first, what you'd want to do is, like, I'll have the Prisma Studio fired up. Studio. Alex, everything is good, right?
Yep. Yeah, okay. That looks good.
I already have two users that I was testing out for. So I'll just I'll clear the database. and my database should be empty. In this case, I'm using SQLite, so keeping it very straightforward. And now I'll seed the database for a testing environment that you'd want to. So what you do is write npx db seed and pass in the environment. Let's do it for the test environment. And voila. So basically, it goes to the switch case and it executes the test seed. And it should have a test user.
It works.
Ta-da.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. It should work.
Yeah.
So one thing, you could have like an addition. You can pass additional arguments that could, again, as I've mentioned before, check whether, make sure that your database is empty. You could perform a truncation, and then you could seed your database. You could check whether there are the data already exists, and then whether you want to seed it in the first place and whatnot. So that's pretty much it. It's a very straightforward example. I think that should be clear, right, Alex?
Yeah, all is good. I hope this, I guess, it sparks the creativity for others to build other tools. One thing that would be important to also note is that if you go to the top of the file, by the way, in the c.ts, the arguments or the options are defined in the options object, which is kind of compulsory, and then they're passed into the parse args utility. So that's how you would define your own arguments besides just environment. Yeah.
So you could have something like clear environment, right? Or clear DB as a parameter, right?
Yeah.
And it would be as a string. And if I just write the options, those are the functions. I'm just showing it down for users to pick up later on, right? Was it clear DB? Yeah.
Yeah. And the function is there, and then you would.
I'll just log it in this case.
Yes.
Log. DB. So this would make, like, if this, you could use this parameter to clear your database first before you seed it. So what you could write is your DB. Let's just name it delete all. Okay, so there's I'll just clear the database. There's a unique.
I think it would work if you omit the environment flag as well, I think, because
no, it's basically there's an email that already exists, right? So it's trying to repopulate the test at email, hence it's right.
Okay.
So clear DB or reset DB. Sorry, my bad. Forgive me, guys.
All good.
So I'll just write. Yeah, this should work. Fingers crossed, and it does work.
And it does, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and you have this delete all parameter, like delete all argument passed in. So you can get creative with it, however you want. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that was a great demo. And with that, we'll bring our first guest onto the stage. And hey Lars, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. And how are you guys?
I am also doing good. If you don't mind, I haven't quite introduced you yet. Could you share a little bit about yourself, who you are, and yeah?
For sure. So I am currently working at Layer 3, and I'm a dev there, where we've been using Prisma for a long time, and then now I've just been like hacking on this thing that I'm gonna show some more about today.
We're excited for it.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. And just out of curiosity, before we jump onto the demo, what was some of the reasons that perhaps you chose Prisma at layer 3 over, say, other tools? Not just general question. Yeah.
General question is because we love types, or we love
Ah.
type safety, and so
Mhm.
that's the main reason. That's the biggest reason for Prisma for us. It's the types
Mhm.
and be able to like push with confidence, and that makes us push and ship faster. So
Did you
that's
try other tools? Sorry to interrupt. Did you try other tools before Prisma?
I have not tried other like type ORMs or like similar tools. No. But I have lived in the world before that, and yeah, I enjoy it more now.
Cool. Let's call that world the before, I think, or the before. Never mind. I think it's a reference to a cartoon that I recently watched. Let's ignore that. So yeah, anywho, we brought you on because you built like a really interesting tool called QueryCrab. So for those who are not have not seen it yet, what is QueryCrab? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to like tell a bit the story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all like it all started a few days ago when I posted this tweet, and I can like just share my screen so like look at it. Um,
I'll
can you
bring
guys
it
see
onto
my screen?
stage. Yes.
Yeah. So basically, I made this tweet showing a video of in VS Code, and you can just press a preview SQL on the query and see the SQL. So actually, the story behind this is kind of like I haven't really told many people yet, but this was actually just something I thought of, and I mocked up super quickly in Figma. So the way I made this was, you see my Figma screens here,
Yeah.
and it's totally just like screenshots. You see, and it was just me messing around. Thought this was a cool idea. It could be cool and useful. And then I posted this tweet, and so many people liked it and told me that, oh, I really need this, man. And and you guys asked me if I wanted to like talk about how I built it on this live show, and I was like, man, now I really want to build this. So, like the last few days has been really hectic for me because I decided, okay, so many people want this. I'm gonna try to take a stab at it and build it. So really good motivation, and I started to look a bit on it, and first of all, I thought about like how would you make something like this, and I thought of a few different options because Prisma has this option where you can log queries, like
Yeah.
Right.
when you do anything and you can log queries. So my first thought was to like, oh, I need to look into logs and make an extension that can somehow understand the logs from your application and like associate them to the right place. But the problem with that is that you kind of needed to like actually call the API route, or like, I don't know, and it would be hard to like associate, oh, these logs come from this place or whatever. So I kind of got stuck on that, and honestly, I wasn't sure how to proceed, how to build it, if it was possible. But then I thought of this thing that, as we just talked about, like Prisma is really strongly typed, and that might be something to use, right? Because when you
Yeah.
hover over these, like hover over here, you see the TypeScript compiler actually knows a lot about what happens here.
Lars?
Yeah.
I think the video on the tweet is frozen. Oh, now I can see it. Yeah.
Now we.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Can you
and now
see
it's gone again.
Oh, it's because I'm trying to share VS Code. Actually, let me try to share VS Code again. Okay, do you guys see my VS Code now or no?
So we see everything. Yeah.
You
So you
see
can
VS
go. No, we see
It's
the browser.
currently
Okay, then I'll try to just share only that screen. Maybe that's gonna be better. Window. Okay, now let me try to bring this into here actually. Oh. Oh, I got it. I was sharing. This should be better. This should be better.
Cool.
Oh yeah. Sorry about that. Do you see my VS Code now?
Yes. Could you bump up the font just a bit?
Yeah, like that.
Yeah.
It works.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, I thought here you have the query, whatever, and when you hover over here, you see actually that the TypeScript compiler knows a lot about what's going on, even in circumstances where it's like a dynamic query, whatever. TypeScript compiler still knows like what kind of types and like selects you do and all of that. So that's why that was kind of like where I started in order to I thought maybe that could be possible. So I went ahead and I basically started writing an extension. And the way it works is that first it calls like find Prisma calls in the file, tries to find all the Prisma calls. And that's why you see I've identified them and added these links on top. And it basically extracts the type information from this. And I have this other function that takes the type information and tries to like make as accurate as possible of an object based on that. So for numbers and strings, you kind of just need to guess, but other like types are more narrow. So basically, I'm going to show that first when I press debug here. Like my extension understands that this is a prisma.find first, and that this is like a pretty close approximation to what the inputs could be. You see here, it's like C because you can't predict the future, right? So that was really cool. And then basically what I wrote is like really hacky, but it works. It works. It's spawn a sub process that goes into the host like environment and basically injects itself and runs this code, this argument on the Prisma model while kind of extracting the queries from whatever happened. So that's how it works. And in practice, when I press preview SQL here, it shows me the query of the actual thing you did. And then that allows you also to like really quickly like see how when you change something, okay, I want to only like select name here, and you press preview SQL again, and you see, okay, that gets the name. It also gets the ID, probably some good reason for that. And you can like add any other property and you see it update. So these are pretty like simple and probably not the most interesting ones. But let's say you want to include something. Like here I include a relation, and you preview that, and that actually results in 2 queries. And there's actually some like pretty like strong discussions under my tweet about this. And stuff like that. And I guess this tool at least lets us see what happens and we can reason about it. I'm sure there are some good reasons. So also like things I'm often like a bit curious on are like, I'm no SQL like pro, but like what happens when you add a count? Like what's that? I hope this is gonna work now. Yeah, let me do it here. It's easier. Doing it right. Okay. Yeah, and you see, like this is like way like more advanced, and you see that, and it works also. Like one thing is for like simple stuff like this, you can kind of look at this and figure it out pretty easily. You can paste this into ChatGPT and it will probably figure it out. But what about like more complex? We use a lot of these like models where you have like a really huge like object like this somewhere else. Or you can even have like a function that dynamically like chooses should we include this or not. And it's impossible for an extension to predict the future, but because like types are so like narrow, it can do really, really good guesses. So even here it like understands and makes like a mock object that's pretty good. And you preview as you go. And for this complex one, it results in these 4 queries.
Really cool. Really
Yeah.
cool.
So one question that I had, like, did you try it with interactive transactions by any chance?
I did not, but I did try it with the delete, and that actually creates that should create a transaction like that. You see, I don't think this record exists, so it actually doesn't delete it. But interactive transaction, that would be something like you then mean this like transaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then you do it inside here.
Right.
Something like that.
You'd have a Prisma instance that would be passed in, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Something like this, right? Yeah, I mean, there's no reason it shouldn't like be possible to. It doesn't work now because like the code would need to like understand. Oh, this is a thing, and then there's something inside here. But the TypeScript compiler, it kind of like it's pretty powerful actually, because what you could do then, if I wanted to add support for this, would be to also not just look for this pattern, look for this pattern. Whenever I find this pattern, I find all the sub things that are inside this block, and yeah, do some magic on that. So
yeah, then you would just like you just apply the same logic that you played on.
Yeah,
right?
So I guess what this does is basically add a begin.
Yeah,
and that's it, basically,
that's
right? Yeah.
Cool.
No, so yeah, I'm honestly a bit happy I actually made it work, because I wasn't that sure this morning even, but now it actually works really well. And the way it works, by just like it doesn't like do too much assumptions. It uses the Prisma client instance of the project, which means that it's not tied to a specific engine, so it should work the same with Mongo or whatever. And I do think right now it's like locally on my computer, but I do hope that it's possible to make it as solid so that it can actually be. It's not yet live on the store, but that would be really cool.
Yeah, that definitely would be cool. We want to see it live, right? Like using it out. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So how long in total did you take to make this?
How long did it take? Well, I had really you work well under pressure, right? But I posted this on Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday, it's been some late nights, and so a few days, but a lot of work these days. So as I said, I'd love to like make this live, make this happen. I also think there can be other features like explaining these queries, or like adding, these are prepared statements. What if you have the actual statements, so you can like just paste them into like some SQL tool, whatever. So yeah, I actually made this website too, QueryCrab.com, just to like collect some emails for people interested, because even if it works with me locally now, it's kind of I think I fear there are some edge cases here, and I'd love to have some people to test it with. That's the plan now.
Okay. How's the response been like to the email?
Yeah, so a lot of people have put their emails here. I haven't reached out to those yet, but I'm planning to do that, and also like hear how if people. I'm sure there are people using Prisma like this in really weird ways that would break the extension. So it's all for the also for that. But yeah, the tweets, the responses on tweets has been like really amazing. A lot of people like, where can I find it? And like, yeah, and then you have this thing, which talks about.
I'm there as well. I'm there as well.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's cool. It's cool.
Just out of curiosity, I just realized that I was accidentally muted, and that's I was wondering why. Yeah, rookie mistake. I know. Just out of curiosity, what inspired the name QueryCrab? I'm just curious because it sounds like a really cute name, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I want it to be a cute application. I should probably have had a better story around it, but I just like Curie. Curie is a good word, you know, and I wanted to find an animal that had the same sound. So it was like Curie, Curie. What other things? I think like Curie cow, maybe. Curie, Curie crab. I was also like, yeah, it was just a name, really. I wanted to have some label on it because then people maybe remember it. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really memorable name for sure, and yeah, I'm really excited to try it out once it's live. The only kind of edge case that would be kind of scary is when you have a delete statement and since it's already using your existing Prisma client instance, that if there's data, it means that it would actually probably delete the data as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, 100%. That's a really good call, and that's it's similar actually to if I do find first on whatever some ID that doesn't exist here. This won't. This will be okay. But if I add the find first or throw, it will actually throw in the code too. So the best thing would be, I'm not sure if there is a way to do this cleanly right now, but the best thing would be to do the query as kind of like a dry run or like a stop right before it hit the database, because there's no reason it needs to hit the database.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure if you guys have any ideas for that.
Maybe either middleware or client extensions, and from client extensions you would be able to intercept a query. I'm not sure if you'd be able to intercept the actual SQL for the query because that happens on a different level. But
need to go ahead.
I think with middleware you can intercept it and just silently fail the query itself, and your workaround. That could be.
Right. That would be amazing. I just need to make sure that it logs the actual SQL before I do that. But yeah, actually, if I don't have that, I'll probably disable it and like delete stuff, because
also tests as well, right? It could interrupt with tests and whatnot, like unexpected behaviors from devs.
Yeah. No, for sure. I would be careful with that. I guess in theory you could like. There's no reason it needs to hit the actual database you're using. Yeah, but mostly delete stuff is. But my feeling is that it's gonna be people are gonna use it mostly for like querying stuff, find many like complex filtering. Deletes are usually simple. It's probably not that important to have it even. So yeah.
Deletes or even write operations, mostly for read.
Yeah. And one other like kind of annoying thing is that if you have things like this code where you have two queries, if you have a where here where it where it has a string, this will like give this query ABC. So the where doesn't exist. And then it only gives one query because it doesn't exist. So you don't see this full story here when this like query doesn't exist. But that's like, there's some like things to figure out. But it doesn't need to be like 100% foolproof. Still a useful tool, I think.
Yeah. But this was a really interesting demo. And again, keep us updated, and hopefully we get to try it out pretty soon. And I think the way you're building the product is like an interesting way, where it's based on interest. It's somehow it's the way some companies are actually building products. So they just tweet that, what if you could do this, and then
Yeah, sure.
end up
Yeah.
building it depending on the interest. Yeah.
For sure. I built so much throughout the years that's just like nobody ended up using it. Not even myself. So
Okay.
Let us know if you need another motivational nudge in Twitter.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll keep you guys posted, and thanks for inviting me, and I'll let you know when we have something to test.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us, and till next time. Ciao.
Next time.
Ciao.
See you.
Awesome. Let me update that. Yeah, awesome. That was a really great demo. And now we'll bring on our next guest who built a really cool library. His name is Max, but I will let him introduce himself. So let's jump into it. Hey, Max, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm also doing well. We're glad to have you on the show. Yeah, could you introduce yourself for the folks who are watching?
Yeah, my name is Max. I'm a software engineer. I'm based in Chicago, and I work at a company called Loop. Loop is a transportation logistics payments company. So we make it easy for companies to pay for logistics services like air and ocean and trucking freight.
Awesome, pretty cool. And we brought you on because you built a really cool library called prisma-lint. And since people might not have heard about it, could you share a little bit of context as to what prisma-lint is?
Yeah.
And what inspired it as well?
Yeah, totally. So it wasn't just me. This was me and also some folks at my company. But we have Prisma schema files, and our domain is pretty complex. So we have over 150 models and dozens of different schema files. And as the team grows, you want to just make sure that we're following consistent conventions around naming and typing and also indexing. And so prisma-lint is basically ESLint, but for Prisma schema files. So in the same way you can lint a JavaScript file with rules according to ESLint configuration, you can lint a Prisma schema file according to a similar configuration.
Pretty cool. I think based on that, let's jump into the demo because I have more questions, but that would be dependent on the demo as well. Yeah.
Cool. Let me start presenting.
I'll bring it on to the stream. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so this is prisma-lint. So you can just install it in the same way you install any other package, run it in the same way. You can either specify a path to a file or it'll just default to the kind of conventional location. And then there's a set of rules, and all the rules are disabled by default. So you need to create a configuration file to enable the rules. And we can walk through these later, but here's a simple configuration file showing some rules. So it's just like ESLint configuration. You define a set of rules, and then for each rule, there's the log level, which is just off or error right now. And then there's a configuration for that specific rule. And so for this rule, for example, this is saying that we want all the model names to be singular rather than plural. So like user rather than users. And if you wanted plural, you would just change the style to plural here.
Okay.
And so, yeah. Any questions on this?
None so far. I'm only curious. You mentioned that you have multiple Prisma schema files, and I'm kind of curious as to how exactly you usually handle that.
Yeah.
So there's another library we use called prisma-merge, although it hasn't been updated in a while. So one of my coworkers has a fork of it that is an improvement that we may release later. But we use this, and basically what we do is we have our code base is structured around the different domains. So for example, you'd have like parcel or ocean or air or freight. And then we treat each of those little directories as a kind of a microservice that has its own data definition and then its own query and mutate services that expose interfaces to the rest of the system. And so we want each of these little domains to be self-contained. And that means that no domains outside of that are directly accessing the Prisma models through Prisma. Instead, we use like query services and mutate services with the idea that when the time comes to split our monolith into microservices, we can expose gRPC interfaces, and then the other parts of the code base can basically replace the service calls with gRPC methods, which would be more difficult if they were directly doing Prisma reads and writes.
So one question, like, are you using one database across the schema, or like, are you relying on multiple databases as well?
Yep, we have one Postgres instance, and it's shared. Yeah. So basically, what we do is we have this different schema files, and then we have a pre-commit hook, which detects if any of the schema files have changed, and if so, it merges them into one schema. So we do have like a prisma/schema.prisma, but we never edit that file directly. Instead, we're always either adding new schema files in the domains, in the domain directories, or editing them.
Pretty cool. And could you, do you have a demo that you could show us on exactly how the error messages look like?
Yep. Yeah, and I'm happy to do a talk on the merging stuff, although that wasn't the focus for today. But yeah, okay, so let's do this. So here's a directory. This is just a simple demo I set up. So we have a Prisma schema file that looks like this. And then we have Prisma rules that look like this. So we're enforcing singular grammatical name. We're requiring the fields tenant ID, created at, and deleted. We're requiring an index on tenant ID. And then we're requiring a field type, if it's created at, to be a date type. So we don't want to use like timestamp or string or something like that. And so if we run prisma-lint on this, we can see that there's errors in this file. So if we have different files, it'll show you a different line for each file. And then on the user's model, it's plural, but we're expecting singular. We're missing a required field deleted. And then on the user's created at fields, the type doesn't match the expected type. And then for the tenant quid, we're missing an index. And so we can just quickly fix those.
No, I'm just curious, based on the error message, are there people that use a string type for date values?
So yeah, it's a good call out. So we try to draw a distinction between timestamps, which are like points in absolute time, and floating dates, which would be like March 5th or something like that. And so we enforce that if you have a field that ends in the name date, it should be a string, because it should just be the if you just look at an invoice, it doesn't say it's due at March 3rd at 12:55 p.m. or whatever. It's like due at March 3rd. And so how you interpret that in absolute time is a function of like business logic. Like, what is the time zone of the company that issued the invoice? Like, how would they map that foot? So it's not, we don't use, so for created at, we use datetime, but we do use string for floating dates.
for like users located in a different time zone, like it's just a side question. If a user is located in a different time zone, right, and the date varies for them, wouldn't that cause an issue?
I mean, it's business logic, right? So it's
Right.
if you just look at a PDF file of an invoice and it says due on June 1st,
You're right.
exactly what you're saying. It's like the interpretation of that with respect to UTC timestamp is a function of business logic, and that's really complex if you have, international trade where some people are based in China, some people are based in the U.S., and the person in China issues an invoice to the person in the U.S. When is it due? And so you need to. So I think what I've learned over the years is like you want to just store the data as literally as you see it on the source. And so if the piece of paper says June 1st, 2023, you don't want to store June 1st, 2023 at midnight in UTC. You want to store June 1st, 2023.
Right.
So
today I learned.
And then like you can have application code that understands how that relates to a location and how that relates to a time zone. Things like that. So, but yeah, so for timestamps like created at, we just want UTC time. And so here we fixed the model name from plural to singular. We changed the type of the created at field. We added an index for tenant. And let's say we just don't want to support soft deletion for this model. We can add a ignore rule. And we can just ignore that specific field. So the other required fields are still required. So now the linter passes. So
pretty cool.
Yeah. So
go
ahead.
Based on the rules that you shared, there's one for the tenant ID. Is it referring to having all models have a tenant ID field or relation, or if I understood correctly?
Yeah. So that's a good question. We don't.
Oh, it's an index.
So there's two separate requirements. So one is here. This guy. This is saying you have to have a tenant ID field on your model. And then this one is saying that you have to have an index for it. But in our case, we don't use tenant relations because like the tenant model, you can think of it as living very low in the domain hierarchy. And we have separate Prisma files. And when you have separate Prisma files, you can't have relations across those. At least in our implementation, we don't allow that, which is good because if we're trying to split into microservices, then we would have to break all those foreign key constraints. And so tenant ID specifically is never going to be a relation in our schema model, but you could have like user and user role and role, like because those are all part of the same user domain, we would use relations there. But that's an interesting idea for a rule. We don't have a rule right now, which is like require relation for field, but we could do that.
Cool.
That is pretty interesting. So basically, you have your relations in those individual schemas, and they live in those domains, right? Just to clarify.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You just think of it as like conceptually, we want to have it be a bunch of microservices, but we don't literally want it to be a bunch of microservices because that's just like a bunch of overhead. But from like a abstraction and composition. So maybe we can look at the other rules that are supported.
Sure.
So we map all of our field names to snake case. And so this will require that. So user ID, good. In this case, there's no mapping needed. And then these would cause warnings. Some words you might want to have like map to snake case in a specific way. And so you can use the compound words argument to say GraphQL should be a compound word in the snake case. Field order requires that fields appear in a specific order. So if you always want tenant ID to appear first, you can do that. Forbid field just forbids fields. So for example, if you always want to use UUIDs instead of IDs, you can forbid ID columns.
So do you forbid the field name UUID, or do you forbid use of the UUID value?
I guess in this case, this would just be based on the name, but that's a good call out. We could, this could be extended. We could call this like forbid field name, and then have another one, which is forbid field type.
Pretty cool. And just out of curiosity, I saw you using NeoVim. I have no experience, if I'm being honest. But if you're working on via an editor like VS Code, would it be possible to kind of detect those warnings or errors as you're defining your schema, or do you have to run the lint as part of a pre-commit hook or CI?
Currently, we do it just as part of a pre-commit hook. The challenge with this is, let's see. We're using this library under the hood.
Would probably have better luck. Oh yeah.
Here we go. And right now, this doesn't when it parses the abstract syntax tree, it doesn't include line numbers, and so that's why when you see the
errors,
yeah, it's just like a dump of the model name and then model name and field name. So we could potentially extend this library, or maybe it does support it. I just don't know. But we would have to basically map from like this AST node has this error to that's this line number in the source text. But with that, it should be pretty straightforward.
Pretty cool. I'm pretty excited to try it out personally for my own project. Given that I work by myself on my side projects, I might have rules that just let go.
You don't want to
sweep under the rag.
Yeah, you don't want to break on rules, right?
It would be nice. Yeah. Pretty cool. Yeah.
So,
do you have any? Oh, sorry.
I guess just one last thing I'll call out is most of the stuff we discussed so far has been style related, but this required field index one, I think, is more performance related. Like if you have query patterns that are going to be, you do like a infinite scroll where you paginate based on created at timestamp, you're going to want to index created at timestamp. And so you can use this rule to enforce those sorts of constraints.
Cool.
Are you planning to extend the performance-related issues? Are you planning to extend that?
I think if there are ideas, definitely happy to do it. Basically what I did was just what we had implemented internally, myself and others, over the last 2 years. I basically just took all those rules and then made them configurable versions. But I'm sure there's a lot of ideas that we didn't come up with. So I can show. I don't know. We can wrap. I can show an example of implementation of a rule if people want to see what that looks like.
Yeah.
Whatever's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Okay, so we'll start with the grammatical number one. So it's really straightforward. You basically just say, here's the rule name, and then we use Zod to define the config. So you say style can be either singular or plural.
Okay.
And then these comments are automatically stripped out of the source code to generate the documentation. So you want to include comments if you add a new rule. And then the actual implementation is super simple. You basically just say, like the meat of it is when a model AST node is detected in the parsed schema, call this hook on it and then report errors there. So it's basically just get the name of the model. If it's plural and the style is singular, then report a violation. Likewise for singular and plural. And that's it. So
pretty cool. And is it possible for someone to kind of extend the current library and define their own linting rules?
I think right now, everything that I had when I originally was designing it, I'd been thinking that I would want to create prisma-lint and then a separate repo called prisma-lint loop, which would have like all of our loop specific rules. And then similar to like ESLint plugins, you can extend the core set of rules. But what I found is that like actually all the rules that we had can be generalized and made configurable in a way that it makes sense. So I think
for everyone else to use it, right?
Exactly. So I think like,
Yeah.
well, let's start by just adding them all to this repo, and then if it turns out that there's a bunch of very idiosyncratic rules that someone wants to support, we can add an extension or plugin support.
Pretty cool. And yeah, I'm really excited about the project. I'll also try this one out. Hopefully I'll define rules that will, given that I'm using planet scale, well, we already enforced the rule that if you have a relation and you're using a relation mode, you have to define a foreign key for that field. Otherwise you'll pay in terms of cost. But I'm sure I can think of another use case for myself, like not using JSON fields for some specific use cases, because it can lead to just messy data sometimes if you want to evolve that particular field. Yeah, but pretty cool. Really excited. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for letting me share.
Awesome. And I hope you publish more if there's anything more to be added, and I'll hopefully see you soon on Slack. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. See ya.
Ciao. Pretty cool. For the final part now, since there are a few, just one plug, I'll go ahead and share my screen pretty quick. So we've been working on adding or supporting ESM modules and ESM module export. And one of our engineers created like an integration version that you could already use. So we'll go ahead and paste the link. There's a version that you can already try out. If this works for you and you're using ESM, again, try it out. Let us know how it works for you. We'll share it in the chat. Give me a moment. There it goes. Let us know what you think. And that is all about it. So, cool. So, were there any questions in the chat? I think there's one. Rec trick on videos with Prisma and Dat Frog on Flutter Mobile. I think this might be referring to the Dart Prisma library that someone from our community created. Unfortunately, this is beyond our scope, and I would recommend reaching out to the library maintainer for that. And hopefully you can get some help on integrating Prisma in Dart.
Yes.
The next one is a little bit of a loaded question, which is questions on performance and if there are any improvements on it, and if we'd like to help out on any performance improvements within the Prisma client or Prisma in general. And what would be helpful is for you to kind of share like example, just a quick reproduction and share exactly where you're experiencing some performance pain points so that we can look into it, debug it, and then improve the Prisma client's performance. But I will guarantee you that we are looking into performance, and we will be improving the performance of Prisma client in the next couple releases.
Yeah, it is already in our focus as far as I know. And one thing is like, blanket statements for us it's like very hard to deal with. So when we do get to know specifically what's being an issue to you, we can actively help you out. And we're pretty active on Slack and even Twitter as well. And of course, it's always there.
We are. I think that is all. We appreciate the love, Victor and Vinny, I believe. Yeah. And with that, we'll wrap up, and hopefully we'll see you on the next stream. Ciao.
Ciao.